Hello, good morning. Welcome back to the podcast Journey to Well. My name's Hannah. I am joined today with Nicole Lange. She is a 5-1 sacral generator. We're going to talk all about human design. But more and most importantly, she is an acupuncturist and longtime holistic educator. And she's a fertility and women's health educator. And we are here to talk about our cycle. And honestly, I would argue that if you are a man, do not turn this off because you're going to learn a lot of important stuff as well. But of course, this is talking about our menstrual cycle, something that I am super passionate about learning about. And Nicole is 1000% more educated than me on this. And so we're going to talk a lot about hormones and balancing our hormone levels and what disrupted hormones look and might feel like and how to come back into balance. And I really love holistic is such a buzzword these days, but I've had a few conversations with Nicole now, and to be able to take our cycle and truly this big picture is way more beneficial than just these little snapshots or tests that we might take. So we're going to dive into all of that. But Nicole, first of all, thank you so much. It's truly an honor to have you on the podcast. And I am
Really
going to
excited.
let you introduce yourself, my dear.
Perfect. I'm so excited to be here. Um, yeah, so you did a great introduction. I've been doing this for 20 years. All I do is see women, and it very quickly, because of my own experience in trauma and sexual reproductive hormone wellness that I was on my own quest for, that became really what I do. And that's all I do in my practice, which is life healing life as opposed to doctor fixing patient. So I'm all about combining evidence based Chinese medicine with the modern science and the trauma informed care. And when you put those three things like three legs of a stool, all of a sudden we have this really amazingly modern best of all the worlds kind of thing that truly serves people better. And it's what we want, it's what we deserve. And so I love getting the opportunity to come on shows like yours and talk about it. So thank you again.
I love your trauma informed. I mean, I don't love your background. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for everything that happened to you, but the way that you took it and learned from it and now support other people, I think that's also really important to talk about in terms of our cycle. We were chatting before we hit record, and when I've noticed the biggest disruptions in my cycle and the most adverse symptoms, I guess we can
Hmm.
say, like physical symptoms of having really severe cramps. Like I've never experienced that in my life. And I'd had cramps so bad I would have to just be in bed and
Yeah.
I'm not really a medicine person, but
Yeah.
I would take ibuprofen. I take like one ibuprofen and that's it for me. That's a lot for me. So, but
Oh,
that's a
if you
lot
need
for
it,
me.
I'm all for it. So I think it can be great for some things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but to
Yeah.
have
But it
like
was,
that cramping and but that was also in the time of my life where I was going through the most stress and the
mhm.
most, I would call it like a traumatic situation,
Yeah.
although there's all levels. So, yeah, the most disruption in my life. And it's interesting. It's kind of interesting, not when you're in it because you're in pain, but it's
Right.
interesting to be like, oh, this is this is
Makes
showing up
sense.
and there's a connection here, but not really knowing, even me, where I do a lot more kind of spiritual
Hmm.
cycle alignment, I think. Um, Even what I know about my cycle, still not really knowing how to support myself when it feels very disrupted.
Yeah. And I love that there's this moment of podcasters and younger people doing all this cycle syncing and cycle
Yeah.
awareness and so much better than where, my mom my mom lied and said she was taking me to a babysitting class and it was a period class and that was it. And then it was never spoken about again.
Yeah.
And, I was like, oh, I have no idea what's going on.
Mm.
So it's great, but I think what I've seen in this is that there's sort of this So I'd like to go back and talk about the history of it a little bit.
Mm,
So when we first started doing the scientific revolution in the 1500s, the science took the body, what we thought of as the body, so all the things we could measure and look at, like hormones, like the Dutch test, like cortisol levels,
mm,
right? And they did all these really amazing things like develop antibiotics and antidotes and EpiPens and ibuprofen, like all sorts of amazing things that really are very helpful and have saved a lot of lives. But at that time, the church kept the what was considered the mind to the point where the sometimes cadavers' heads would be cut off and given to the church to like symbolize how the science wasn't the mind. And so
wow.
we had this whole system of really amazing reductionist medicine that looks smaller at the things that we can measure and test. And again, that can be really amazing when you have to
Mm,
find something. Um, Fast forward a couple hundred years where we want the mind back in and we start to understand that it's not just church. Psychology gets added, but it's still very fringe and very inaccessible and also kind of reductionist too, like looking at neurochemicals and looking at things like that. And so we're to this moment in, I think, the last, I don't know, 20 years, really. It's so exciting to practice right now, where all of a sudden we're like, wait a second, all systems are interconnected. The mind and the body are really one.
mm,
Everything interacts with everything else. And yes, if you have pathology where you have to like find something and fix it, that reductionist stuff is really, really powerful and the best. But for everything else that's subclinical, that's undiagnosable, that's ongoing, that's multi-systemic, that involves the mind body, which is like so much more of what we deal with on a regular basis, we don't have medicine built for that. And so
mm.
that's where it's really interesting to be a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner because traditional medicine never took them apart. And so,
Wow.
like, I could say, based on your story, when you said, it was the most stressful period, I was feeling really unmoored, I was trying to get my bearings again. Chinese medicine says when there's pain, it's because something is stuck. And it can be subtle, like energetic, or it can be physical, like a fibroid or endometriosis, right? And the severity and the protractedness of it will indicate where on the continuum it is. If
Mm,
it's like for a while when you're really stressed, that's probably really significant chi stagnation. If it's
mm,
all the time when you're not stressed and you're doing a lot right, then it's probably something physiological. And so that's where I love like I can see a person and look at their circumstances and I don't have to jump to a hysteroscopy or an ultrasound. I can say, let's start with the fact that you're so stressed.
mm,
Let's start regulating your nervous system and your sense of felt safety or lack thereof, and then let's see what that does in your cycle. And classically the things that cause chi stagnation are a desire to control and unfulfilled desires. So we start talking about how do we hold that lack of control and things like that. And it really shows up in bodies. And again, if it's not enough, then we start to look at the physiological stuff.
mm. So how long are you looking at the more energetic side of it versus, okay, now we should probably do some testing because like you said, that was really
Right.
interesting. You said, and I'm not gonna word it, but you said something like when if we're doing all the things right, maybe
Right.
it's some chi or energy stagnation or some
Yeah.
stuckness.
Yeah.
And if it's still not getting better, then maybe
Hmm.
it's more physiological. So where is that? How does that timeline kind of look?
So sometimes you can tell right off the bat, right? Like if I have somebody who's having, passing big clots or like slimy film in their periods and like flooding and, has a certain constellation of other big picture signs that go with that family history. I would jump right to, okay, we're going to test for infections and we're going to think about physiology more, like physical things going on. And so I have people that I refer to right away. But if it's like, yeah, you didn't have really bad periods before, your menstrual blood, it's painful, it's clenchy, but it's not, anything really observably significantly different,
Mm,
and I know you're under all this stress, then we're like, let's do 2, 3 cycles and let me support you and let me regulate. Acupuncture is very, very good. I say it's like closing all the tabs and restarting your nervous system.
mm,
So, if I can do that in sessions and then also give the tools and the reframes and the work to do in between the sessions for processing the trauma, for um, radical acceptance, for compassion, for emotional expression, all the big picture things that go with it, then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, my next cycle was a lot better. Okay, we're on the right track.
Mm,
So,
mm. Acupuncture is interesting. It's something that I've tried a couple times, but I can't I can't get past the needles just staying there. Like
yeah,
I've done it a few times and I hear so many good things about it.
it's it's not the same for everyone. I think the research says I think about 85% of people have a really interesting dopamine cascade from acupuncture. And there's certain things that we can observe on like fMRIs where we can
Yeah.
look at brain activity changing and things like that. But not everybody experiences that same cascade. I think I'm a little bit less into acupuncture, which is hilarious that I'm an acupuncturist, but it's
Yeah.
not my go-to. Like I'll do it for like when I have a sinus infection or
Mm,
some, you know, my kid has jaw pain or something like that, but that's not my go-to for resetting my nervous system.
mm,
But for many, many people, I can see them and they're in full in crisis mode when they come into my office and they're, you know, in the middle of waiting for a miscarriage or,
mm,
caring for a parent who's at the end of their life and parenting at the same time and things like that. And it's like they're just, you know, really dysregulated for lots of very real conditions. And we
mm.
honor that and we express it and we sit with it. And then they get on the table and I put the needles in it and I come back and they're like, I'm okay. And
Ah,
it's just really humbling. It's like,
mm,
how?
mm,
Just get out of the
mm.
way. But not for everybody. And you might not be one of those people. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I want to say,
No,
oh, go ahead.
no, you go.
I was going to say, sometimes you go to an acupuncturist who's like hardcore, like no pain, no gain. And that's not trauma informed acupuncture. That might be like I threw out my back acupuncture or something. But like if you go to an acupuncturist and they're like doing all sorts of stuff that you're like, this doesn't really feel good. I'm not really like I'm uncomfortable from the get-go, including the setup, like a trauma informed practice. It's like I have a doorbell for people to ring. I have dimmable lights. I have an eye pillow. I have a whole bunch of music selections. I have, three different heaters on my table to make it warmer, cooler. So it should just be really blissful and comfortable by
Mm.
the time that person is leaving you with needles in to just, like you said, kind of it's freaky. Just sit there with some needles sticking out of your body.
That's such a good point. And we talk a lot about nervous system regulation on this podcast. It's a huge interest of mine, and I truly think it's really the root of
Hmm.
everything, honestly,
Right.
if I could argue that. So when we're talking in terms of a dysregulated nervous system and our cycle, what
Hmm.
are, I already said this in human design, I'm such like a data person and I need
Yeah.
specifics. So, and I think it's very beneficial on podcasts too. It's not just for me, but
Yeah.
what are symptoms like when we're saying these terms like a normal period or a bad period or bad symptoms, what
Yeah.
are symptoms that are normally showing up or most often showing up and maybe pairing that with you're noticing maybe that this client is having some dysregulation in their nervous system.
Yeah, so if it's showing up in the cycle, I mean there's so much usually going right with people's cycles, even when there's problems to be
Mm,
troubleshot. So I look at the length, first of all, the length of the overall cycle, right? And we want it to be like mostly what we care about is even if it's long, if from when you ovulate to when you start bleeding, you have at least 10 days. So even if it takes you 30 days to get to where you ovulate for somebody with polycystic ovarian syndrome, they eventually hit a point where they ovulate. The trick in that case is understanding how to listen to your body and not just try to follow along like a textbook because it's not going to happen. But still, a lot is going right. There's just fewer chances per calendar year to try to have a baby, and we can work on that. But if there's 10 days minimum from when you get your when you ovulate to when you get your period, then really hormonally things are going okay. Now there might be things to dial in, like I said, if you have a really long follicular phase, or you're not sure if you ovulate. But if you get a period, you're ovulating usually at least 2 weeks before then. Um, so cycle length and specifically luteal phase back half length is a big deal. Now, some things that are really important, like when we're thinking about that reductionistic testing, like if you get drawn into the like, I'm going to do the thing where I do modern fertility or I do the prove or I do the, and it's going to tell me what my progesterone is if I ovulated or not. Progesterone changes within every 90-minute window eightfold. So within like, it can in the same exact person look like anything from the average range is 2 in your luteal mid luteal phase, which would
Mm.
look very low, to 40, which would look super robust,
Wow.
depending on when you do that test. So it doesn't really matter to me when people are like, but my progesterone's only a 7 or whatever. It's like, is your luteal phase at least 10 days? Then your progesterone, you just caught it at a bad minute, and as it was pulsing or not pulsing, you're
Hmm.
good. Um, and if it's not 10 days, then yeah, maybe progesterone would be helpful. So that's a
Mm.
thing. And then looking at the actual menstrual flow. So looking at what is the quality of the blood? Is it, what color is it? It should be relatively fresh red. It might be a little brown to start because sometimes the cervix closes at the end of the last cycle and some old stuff just pools up there and it has to get out before the next stuff comes out. But we're looking for not any clots bigger than like the size of a pea. We're looking for not like stringy, slimy biofilm is what it usually is, which is a sign of infection like bacterial vaginosis or endometritis,
Mm.
which is a uterine lining infection that some people have that's very asymptomatic. But if you're shedding a bunch of like slime, a bunch of like tissue looking like flakes of Kleenex almost floating in the toilet, that's
Mm.
more infection.
Hmm.
Um, and then like really, really heavy flooding is inflammation. So if you're just like, I just like wake up and I bleed through everything and I'm changing tampons all the time, that's an inflammatory marker. So it could be endo, could be infection. And then clots. Clots are a sign that the blood can't get out smoothly. So if somebody's passing big giant clots, it could be because it's inflamed and kind of constricted in there. It could be because there's a fibroid. It could be because there's a polyp or something like that. And so there's usually pretty bad cramps with big enough clots because the body's really working to get those clots out effectively. So it has to cramp more.
Hmm.
So, so that's what I would look at in my 90-day program. I have a flow chart. I love it. So it's it really is like, if your blood looks like this, like if it's very pink,
Mm.
think about this. If it's very dark, think about this. If it's got big clots, think about. So I've had doctors call me and are like, "Are you doing ultrasounds? What are you doing hormone levels? How are you?" Everybody that you send already knows what they're dealing with. And it's like, you can tell. I don't need
Wow.
a test. I just want them to go to the doctor to get it confirmed and then treated if there's something.
Mm. I think that's so important. And you and I were talking about this before. For me, one of the things that I've always pondered and kind of struggled with is, do I do the testing? Do I not do the testing?
Hmm.
And I really love that you are education focused. And I love that you just said you can tell your body is always talking to you. That my language is my languaging is your body is always talking to you. We just have to learn how it's talking. We have to learn the
Right.
communication because it's not going to talk in English words. Your
Yeah.
blood is not going to start talking to you and say, hey, this is what's going on. But to learn how the body is speaking to you and how to interpret that, I think that's super important and such an empowering tool. I think that's what it is. One of
Yeah.
my things is I hate feeling like I don't know, like I can't help myself.
I
And
think
so
the
to
unknown is the
learn that.
worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the worst. I think if you could be
Yeah.
like, you know what, you do have this problem. Here's like XYZ symptoms. You need to go to this doctor to get this test to confirm it. And then you might have to do this treatment. It's like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
But like, what is happening? Why is this? Am I dying? Am I okay? Is this normal? Oh, this doctor said it's just what periods are like, but it doesn't feel good. That's so
Mm,
disempowering. Like you said, it's so
mm,
unfortunate. And to circle back full circle to the like stress component, it's very threatening to be like, okay, something feels wrong. I'm being dismissed. I don't feel like I have avenues to truly understand it.
mm,
So, I've had a wait list in my practice for over 18, 19 years now. And I was so tired of being a bottleneck. And I was like, everybody needs to be able to like have somebody look at their cycle, look at their
mm,
body, their mind, and know this. So that's why I spent 5 years doing my main program because it's everything I do in person. Like, so you can just, wherever you are, like there are people in India that do it, people in Germany that do it, as long as you can understand English, it's available. And it's been so amazing to see people like, yeah, I didn't need any tests. And a lot of times when it is subtle, it responds so beautifully to the holistic stuff. So sometimes like
Mm.
a story that comes to mind is a person who had done multiple IVF cycles to get pregnant and then had a near term stillbirth. And she found my program and started doing it with her partner, with her husband. They would do it as a date and go for a walk and process and talk. And my program, the first module is the foundation, which is all felt safety and trauma informed stuff. And so we start there and then we get into troubleshooting, what I call the nursery, which is the hormones and what your cycle's telling you after we have that sense of safety and regulation and perspective. And then we get even bigger and look at the rest of the, I call it the house, the mind and the body. Like, how is your sleep? What is your digestion like? What is, how's your anxiety level? And then we go into the neighborhood, which is relationships and purpose and community. And she did all of this and she was so interactive. She was always sending me messages and
Mm.
feedback while she was doing the program. It was just like my husband and I would be like, she's like the dream person in the program. And
Oh.
she got pregnant naturally without, and she had done multiple IVFs to have her first pregnancy and had another son. And I just it's again, it's so humbling and so it's my goal to change the culture so that everyone can have that. And after she, a couple of years later, she's like, we're gonna do a consult to transfer to their embryo because we want another baby. And she got pregnant again naturally. So, I mean, it was just like, and obviously everybody's different, but like in many, many cases, it's more subtle and it's more about the body having the right conditions to feel fertile, not so much pathology and infertility. And all we have to offer people is pathology and infertility investigation and treatment. And
Mm.
for like 75% of people, that's not their main thing. It's that their body just doesn't feel regulated enough to want to grow a human. It's a
Wow.
big ask. So, yeah, you should investigate if there are those signs, but a lot of times it's the foundation and the whole body, not the bits and pieces.
Mm. That's so interesting to me because and I don't have kids. I haven't tried to have kids. I have no
Hmm.
idea how fertile I am, all of these things. So this is coming from a very ignorant place, let me preface that way. But I've also felt that, and you would probably know the research, but I feel like we have a lot more IVF going on and a lot more infertility. And my thought is always what you just said, that like there must be some connection between how we are regulating ourselves and how we're supporting fertility
Yeah.
than just this random uptick of
Yeah.
infertility and needing
Yeah.
IVF.
Yeah, there's definitely some environmental factors as well, but I think you're right. And
Mm,
especially like when we think of like what feels in our control and what makes the biggest
mm.
difference, like we're not going to magically make there be no phthalates or microplastics in the world. We can vote with
Oh,
our dollars and stuff, but
yeah.
that's not the same versus like the real sort of empowered tolerability that comes with feeling like, okay, but I can do XYZ. It shows up in my immediate quality of life and my day-to-day experience. And it helps my fertility and
Mm,
it helps my cycles. So it's like you don't have to just, I think that's one of the things that's really hard to see is that infertility culture itself is actively dysregulating and harming people's nervous systems in places that it doesn't need to because it's so piecemeal, because it's not very compassionate, because it's not particularly trauma informed in most places. And
ah,
so let's just imagine that there is a legitimate thing, like a person really has, a blocked fallopian tubes, like for sure they need IVF or something. But then they go into this system that actively makes their body feel threatened at every single appointment, every single interaction. And now it's like, yeah, you need IVF, but like we've just made that IVF way more uphill and way more traumatic. 50% of people who go through IVF have PTSD afterwards. It's like
ah,
unacceptable. And then they're trying to parent in the best case scenario, or they're moving on in the worst case scenario.
mm.
So it just is really, I really do. I'm interested to hear what you say about my numbers because it's like my goal to change the world. I
Yeah.
want people to understand and have the information to like do better because it's what we all want and deserve. And it's not on us that the systems haven't been built for it. It's available. We just don't know where to get it.
Mm. Well, and that's really the thing. I mean, I didn't even know that you exist, and that's why I'm
Right.
just so thankful and I'm so humbled by my podcast to have people like you reach out to want to come on and share your expertise and your story because that's one of the hardest things is we don't know
Right.
where to get this information, and especially you are, I don't even remember where you are. You're not in New Hampshire though.
I'm
Where
in
are you?
Minneapolis in
Minneapolis.
Minnesota. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, like you're states away. It's not like
Yeah.
I could just Google you and
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
business would pop up as a local business. So to be able to share this information and even just provide that intro that, oh, I have other options. I have other ways that I can go about this because we really just do hear about like, oh, you can't have a baby, do I IVF or
Yeah.
or the doc, your doctor, hopefully your doctor is supportive and has other tools,
Yeah.
but we don't I don't want
Well,
to
and even if you're doing IVF or Clomid or whatever, letrozole, like it's so helpful to know, like,
yeah.
oh, but I know that I always ovulate on day, sometimes when people get closer to perimenopause, they start ovulating really early because they're actually starting to grow their eggs in the back half of the prior cycle. And so it looks like they're ovulating on day like 7, but really they started growing that egg the month before. Like this is another thing that I teach about. And it's like, so you have to know that like you might need your IUI or you might grow your eggs really fast, or you might have to do some other form of suppression to stop that from happening if you want a whole batch of eggs to be together at the start. And
Mm,
it's like it's not unusual for that to happen. That's a very typical thing in a body that's getting closer to perimenopause or for somebody who has genetic premature ovarian decline. And so it's like, yeah, just understanding your body so that then you can go in and say, listen, I always ovulate on day 28. I might have to stim longer. I might, not do my IUI until later. And that's fine. As long as I know when I'm ovulating, I can follow along and get a good treatment.
mm.
And yeah, it's so doable. It's so doable. And I'm so grateful that people that aren't in the thick of fertility still say yes to having me on the show because it's my dream that people know this way before so that it's part of their sort of philosophy.
Yeah, that's a big part of my business is the prevention. Like
Hmm.
let's learn before we get to the breaking point. So
Yeah.
let's start living in more alignment and regulating our nervous system before we get so dysregulated that XYZ
Yep.
happens. And let's learn all of this before we hit the point of burnout and chronic fatigue and we
Yep.
have to take a year off of work or, our business or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so sexy to be like, but I have adrenal fatigue or it's like, but no, look at your lifestyle. Look at what your like
Yeah.
you can tell without that.
Yeah. Let's talk about adrenal fatigue because I know you
Sure.
mentioned that earlier, and
Yeah.
that is something that I would argue that everyone is dealing with. So, what is it? How does it come about? And then how
Yeah.
does it affect your cycle?
So adrenal fatigue actually is not real. So
Oh,
it's very, very real to be exhausted and
mm,
anxious or have trouble sleeping. Like that is totally real. But adrenal fatigue is not a medically recognized thing because either your adrenals are working appropriate to their conditions, and so they can be very erratic or they can be,
mm,
like down regulating because they've been up regulated for too long that they're trying to like help you out.
yeah.
But true adrenal deficiency is a serious life-threatening disease. So if your adrenals really aren't like you're in the hospital, you're needing hormones injected into your body to live.
Wow.
So this idea that, and again, it's so sexy, like, oh, I have adrenal fatigue. I have to take these adaptogens and I'm going to do these mushrooms and that's going to help my adrenals function better because I'm in adrenal fatigue. It's like, no, but like, look at like you just had a terrible abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Now you're like at square one thinking about like where you are in your life and what, who you are and what this means about you. You aren't sleeping well because you just moved to someplace new. You're stressed about finances because you have to pay
Mm,
for your rent by yourself because you've lived with the person. It's just like groceries. You're not eating because you're feeling a little bit depressed or a little bit anxious. And it's like you're exhausted and you feel crappy because your adrenals are totally reflecting exactly what your life is there.
Wow.
And so cortisol and other stress hormones are made out of the same building blocks as sex hormones. So stress hormones and sex hormones have the same building blocks. So you can rob the building blocks so that's where the cycle irregularity can start to come in when you're very stressed. And then they also, because they're made out of the same building blocks, they can go to the same receptors in your body. And so let's say you're injecting the hormones from the outside because you're doing an IVF, but you're still really flooded with the stress hormones, the receptors aren't as available. So again, it goes back to that, like the foundation is always first with me, the felt safety, the neuroception, the like scanning your body, like, is this safe? What is my heart rate? What is my respiratory rate? What are my
Mm.
relationships? Am I safe? Am I abundant? Am I regulated? And it's not like you have to be perfect or on this upward trajectory. Like that's all like toxic positivity BS. But it's like if you add up all the moments in an equation, you like data, I like data. We want more of those moments to be like, yeah, I'm regulated. Yeah, I'm safe. And like if something legitimately stressful happens, hallelujah, that we have a stress response and that we can activate that, do all the things to deal with that, thrive, survive, and then reset. And that's the part that doesn't happen a lot of times is we don't think about resetting and taking breaks in more parts of the equation. So that's really my goal is I always teach the mantra, it's not the stress, it's how I relate. Like stress is not your enemy, but how you relate to your stress. Like what are you just thinking you can take some mushrooms and carry on? That's not going to work. But
Wow.
are you, oh, my body's reflecting my conditions. How do I change my conditions so that my body can better reflect something that feels more regulated and abundant? Then everything else falls into place.
Hmm. That's a tough question. That's easy to talk about,
Mm,
but that's a really tough implementation of
yeah.
how can I change these conditions around me? Because I'm playing devil's advocate,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of times we feel that we can't change a lot of our conditions. And there's things within our control. And of course, I preach that for sure.
Yeah.
But two plays devil's advocate because we can
Yeah.
all think of these times in our life where we feel stuck or we feel that we just can't change that much. Like, I have to do this. I know that it's stressing me out,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
I'm a single mom and I have to
Yeah.
work two jobs right now. Like,
Yep.
that's just a not possible. Um, and I'm sure you see this in your clinic.
Yeah.
So how do we make those small changes and what are those small changes?
I love that you're playing devil's advocate here because I think it's so you have to see it in real life. So many things come to mind for me. So the first thing is I want to talk about a study first because you like data. So they did this study where it was an 8-year study, longitudinal study, where they surveyed over 30,000 people and asked them, how would you rate your stress in the last year? Higher than average, average, or lower than average? And then how do you feel about stress? It's good for me, it's bad for me, neutral. And then for 8 years, they watched who died. And when they looked at the people that rated their stress as low compared to the people that marked their stress as high, the death rate of the people that marked their stress as high was significantly higher, statistically significantly higher in the people that said stress is bad for them. In the higher than average, but neutral or like stress, I thrive in stress, I need stress, they had the exact same death rate as the low stress people. So that's like so I'll repeat, it's not the stress, it's how I relate. If you think I'm a single mom, it's going to give me a heart attack, it's terrible. This is like and you're telling yourself this story, I can't stop it. I have no control. This is, I don't have enough support, which is all very true and very, unfortunate all the layers of our society that don't serve underserved people. Um, that's going to be really harmful to a person's cardiovascular health, respiratory health, immune system function, all of that. If you take that same person and you start to do like reprocessing and rethinking about stress, sort of cognitive changes. So, like, one of the ways that you can do this for something that would pretty much feel totally intolerable to anybody is to find a purpose in it. So, like, yes, this is unrelenting stress, but my purpose is to like raise these kids and make the world a better place with these little humans. Or my purpose is to be a leader in the single mom community and mentor and connect with others and build a community together. Or my purpose. Viktor Frankl famously kind of came up with this as a foundation of his work, Man's Search for Meaning. He had survived multiple concentration camps. And he
Uh,
said the only thing that when he looked at survivors and people that really did okay, there was a theme of finding purpose. And so, like, I have to stay at this job because I need this money to pay for this surgery and this job is burning me out. Okay, then you have to focus on the purpose versus I hate this job, I hate this job, this job is bad, this job is ruining everything, right? So that little flip itself can be really good. And then finite kind of stretches of like really intense stress can be really helpful too. There's another research where they did the biosphere project where they did these biospheres and we're trying to have people live in them for like 3 years to see if we could live on Mars or the moon.
uh,
And it failed both times they tried to do it. And one of the big factors was that a lot of the bigger plants would mature really quickly and get pale and slump over and die. And they looked at like the soil and the oxygen and all the things, and they couldn't figure out what was going on for a while. And eventually they figured out that it was the lack of wind because trees, big plants, only get this kind of thing called stress wood when they have adversity. And so, one thing that I teach my patients when they're in it is like, think about how you can cultivate post traumatic growth, how you're cultivating stress wood. And like, you might be in a month-long tsunami or a rainy period, but like, if you can focus on what you're cultivating and what the purpose is and what the framework is, that's going to make it a lot more tolerable and you'll grow in it. Now, you don't want to live in a hurricane for 5 years if you can help it. That's where you start to connect with community and get more resourced and get more regulated and think and find things like that too. So, so many layers, so many layers.
Thank you for sharing that. That's one of my favorite examples, or I don't, what is that called? Images, I guess,
Yeah.
of the tree and how trees really develop their strength from the wind and from adversity. And that's a really beautiful perspective to hold. I feel like I need to do this whole research study of how do we build those perspectives, because everyone, now that I've had my podcast for so long, a year or two,
Yeah.
everyone that comes on, we have the, not everyone, but I can see these patterns of people that seem to be, hmm, people have found these patterns of no matter what happens to me, like
Hmm.
I'm going to find the positive from it, or that lesson from no
Yeah.
matter what happens to me, because we can't really control what happens. But
Yeah.
I love that study that you shared, and thank you for sharing it, of it's your response to it. It's how you feel about stress, and really debunking that, because stress, I mean, and it's a balance, right? Because we don't
Yeah.
want to live in an overly stressed state all the time, and that's getting back to the nervous system regulation, but to
Yeah.
have your purpose behind, okay, this is maybe causing my body some stress. It is, I'm getting a little bit less sleep, or I'm not
Yeah.
able to move as much, and but I'm connected to that why behind it. That's huge. That's life changing. And I would imagine, I'm not sure if you can, maybe you can like qualitatively talk about this, but um I would assume that as you're working with clients, even just on that level, you see these
Yeah.
biomarkers reducing.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not asking people to do biomarkers, but like in their day to day,
Okay.
I give people a report of findings when we start, and it's got these pattern columns of like, this is how you can tell your chi is stuck. This is how you can tell your blood is stuck. This is how you can tell your chi is deficient or your yin is deficient. And I'll just say, like, you can't tell you're pregnant every day, but you can look at these things and, oh yeah, I'm way less stuck. Oh yeah, that
Mm,
is starting to build up. Oh yeah, that, XYZ is better. And it's a very moderate, unsexy, sustainable, doable, accessible thing. And it's like, it's not this, amazing ad on a beach of Hawaii, mixing up my smoothie with all the things that fixed everything and my
oh,
hair has never been better. But it's like,
yeah.
I mean, my personal story, I have a high childhood ACEs, a lot of embodied childhood trauma. I was assaulted and had a subsequent suicide attempt, failed suicide attempt in intensive care unit hospitalization and then psychiatric hospitalization. And in my early 20s, I didn't have a period for 2 years. I literally was laying on the floor in my acupuncture classes, like in excruciating pain. I have ileitis, which most commonly is connected to Crohn's disease, not always, but ulcers in my ileum, gastritis, inflamed stomach, diagnosed on, endoscopies, colonoscopies, so like legit.
Yeah.
Lots of PTSD, lots of sleep issues, lots of digestive discomfort. I would have a bowel movement like once a week if I was lucky. And I was just like such a mess and like I did all the things Western medicine could do to like, here's you could try birth control to, try to regulate your hormones or get your cycle to come back. Do you want Clomid? No, I don't want Clomid. Um, you can, there's nothing you can do for your stomach. You should eat more fiber and just be less stressed. And here's a bunch of SSRIs and here's a sleeping pill for sleep. And it was like, that's all I knew. I didn't grow up in this medicine. I didn't grow up in holistic anything. And so I was just like really pretty desperate and dysregulated. And the way that Chinese medicine connected my gut to my mind, to my cycle, to my trauma, to my everything, it just all got better. And so, I don't hardly ever have stomach issues, even though I very strong both my parents have autoimmune disease, one has celiac. I don't hardly ever have stomach issues. I have regular bowel movements. I'm not super anxious.
Mm.
I still am not the best sleeper, but it's like totally manageable,
Mm.
and I had my two kids literally the first time we tried for both of them,
Wow.
and so I just think we can chase this pathology and it just doesn't get us what we want versus if we zoom back out and just work on the big unsexy stuff, but it really shows up.
I love that. Work on the big, unsexy stuff. It's true, though. In the small, it's in the small things, and that statement can be applied to so many different topics, but it really is. It's typically not these big bookmarks. It's the small things that make the biggest difference over time, and they compound.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
that's also, I think, what I understand about cycles is it's not always going to show up right away. Like, doing one thing for 1 week is not gonna
Yeah.
maybe show up in your body or your cycle, or doing a few things, you might still notice that your cycle is kind of the same or relatively the same like that next cycle, but
Yeah.
over time you're going to feel these differences or notice these differences. Is that?
Especially if you do it in a not clenchy. Most people that intuitively can understand that word clenchy. That's like a
Mm.
cheese stagnation kind of word that I use. So, like, what I'll see sometimes is like, I want to work on things big picture. I want to connect the
Mm.
dots. I've burnt out on Western, whatever it has to offer. And then they'll come in and be like, so how many things can I do?
Yeah.
Should I do herbs? Should I see you twice a week? Should I, and it's like, no, that's more of the like I'm trying to fix something versus the like
Mm.
what is sustainable, what actually makes your nervous system feel regulated, like come in to see me once a week, once every other week, maybe cut out 5 of the supplements of the spreadsheet that you have from other practitioners telling you need 22 different things, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe you should have boundaries and just work on some joy and some hobbies or some community connection, and
Mm.
it feels so unpleasant, especially if people are wired to be like I'm doing, like that doing mindset of like all their neural plasticity is wired to like I'm gonna achieve this, right? And then I'm like, do less,
Mm-hmm.
cut, be,
Mm.
and they're like, oh, I hate this. This feels, and I'm like, yeah, anything that's novel and unfamiliar is very threatening until you learn that it's not. So like I
Yeah.
have people that are like, Nicole, I hate
Yeah.
this. For the first week, they're like, I actually feel worse. because you're asking me to chill out and
Yeah.
I am not a chill person and like screw you. I'm not gonna and I'm like just trust the process. Like you would not
Yeah.
expect like if one pathway in your brain is a super highway and the other one is like a grass path that's never even been trampled down.
Right.
Like you're not gonna in a week just be like, yeah, it feels totally comfortable to go on that path and I don't want to go on the superhighway anymore. It's like you want to go on the superhighway. It is very easy and familiar. So there's this relearning process that has to happen sometimes. And that's literally, I think that's the only thing I ever ask people to do that is not immediately beneficial to their quality of life is when they're very
Mm.
clenchy and they have a lot of chi stagnation. It's like, and fake it till you make it, right? Like I'm like, yeah, just pick 3 things a day, even though you think they're stupid. And like,
I
don't
love
work
that.
during your lunch. And like, listen to a stupid meditation that you can't even focus on and just like, just lay there on your yoga mat and hate it. That's okay. Like, you just have to start somewhere to start sort of tamping down the grass a little bit. And
Mm.
eventually you'll get it. And then you'll be like, oh, I do like, I say it's like the superhighways going up a mountain and you're a horse and like the grass is like grass and like pasture and flowers. And you're like, of course your horse needs to do that and shouldn't just go up a mountain every day. But like if your horse, you hitch it up and every day it just goes up a mountain
Mm.
autopilot and you try to get your horse to go in a pasture, it like literally a horse would be like, no, 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 I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
do that. You have to get it enough times in there to be like, oh, this is actually quite nice.
Wow.
So it's retraining your brain, retraining your chi.
Yeah, and your nervous system too, because our nervous systems get stuck in that fight
Yeah.
or flight or that going up a mountain. I like that image too. And it is more uncomfortable to the nervous system to actually do the things that are
Yeah.
restorative and slowing down because it's very uncomfortable, especially when your nervous system is very dysregulated. It's very uncomfortable
Hmm.
to switch
Yeah.
and slow down and to stop and then it's like what do I do when I
Yeah.
stop, like,
You just
yeah,
gotta
when I'm
feel the
doing the
freak out. You
meditation.
want me to feel the freak out that's happening
Ugh.
under the surface all the time anyways?
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's,
And it's and I always say, it's not it feels familiar, but to your subconscious, to your nervous system, it is going up a mountain. And like you'll have those
yeah,
days where I'll say like you have your meltdown or you're just like, this is not sustainable. Or like you want to punch something. And it's like those are the days where your horse's poor little hooves are like the rubble's coming up the side of the mountain and it's like scrambling to stay on it, And then but then the next morning you wake up and it's like, okay, let's do the mountain again. So it's
yeah.
just even if it feels normal, it's not a healthy place for your body to have to hang out day in, day out. And that's where, it's not the stress, it's how you relate. It's like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to go up a mountain. Sometimes there are really good reasons to go up a mountain. Sometimes there's no choice but to go over a mountain. But like, don't go up a mountain all day, every day without good purpose and without the framework to go up a mountain. And when you have the opportunity, hang out in the pasture too. And that's the balance.
Mm-hmm. I love how you're talking about seeing the big picture too, because as you're talking, I have your human design chart, and we have a piece in human design called variables or arrows,
Okay.
and there's 4 arrows, and each arrow means something different. So we have an arrow of perspective, an arrow of environment, awareness, um, our digestion arrow, and generally, like just very generally, big picture, the 4 arrows are either pointing to the right or to the left. And
Okay.
so if it's facing to the left in general, that's more detail oriented, a little bit more specific, a little bit like smaller picture. And then if it's facing to the right, it tends to be a little bit bigger picture, maybe a little bit more holistic. It tends to be a little bit more like flexible and variable.
Uh-huh.
And all of our arrows can face either, all 4 arrows face either right or left. Yours happen to all be right facing arrows, which I really love for you. And I
That
love, this is what I love, like pulling my client, not
that's
client, my
cool.
guests' human
Yeah.
design charts, is seeing like where you're really living in alignment from a human design perspective, and just
Yeah.
the way that your business is really formulated just feels very, I don't know, kind of confirming to me that you have such a gift of seeing the big picture. Especially, all of them are different, right? So our arrow of awareness, specifically having it right facing, is being able to see the big picture, and that's a gift because we're all either more like details and into specifics, or big picture, and how we learn typically is like
Yeah.
for you facing right is more big picture, and being able to zoom out. That's a huge gift. I see that as a huge gift. So I just wanted to point that out about your
That's
human
cool.
design. I
That's
love that for
cool.
you.
Yeah, I know nothing about
Yeah.
human design. And my husband, I would guess he's facing the other way, and he would tell you
Ah.
we complement and we clash because I'm like, why would you look at it that way? And he's like, why would you look at it that way? And then
Yeah.
we get a
Yeah.
little bit frustrated, and then we do the best
Yeah.
mix.
Yeah. Well, and that's really the benefit of learning, to me, the benefit of learning human design, like, and our partners, because, right, we're not always going to have the same
Yeah,
perspective, but being able to be like, oh, that makes sense. He's more left face. And I mean, I don't know him, so we don't know, but I
he's
did
great.
just want to share that.
That's cool.
I, I'm sure he's great. Knowing you a little bit, he has to be great. Um, so two more things, and then we'll close. I know we're coming to an end. I'm curious if you could share. You've shared little tidbits about your program that you've created that's virtual, but I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit more about it, just for people that are feeling very resonating a lot
Yeah.
with this podcast, and really wanting to connect and learn more about these
Yeah.
ways that we can learn the communication of our body.
Yeah, so the full program is called The Baby You Want. Although I have
Mm.
had friends who have had cancer diagnoses or people that have been going through, divorces or aging parents, and I'm like, you're my friend. Check out this video. And they'll be like, Nicole, like this, you should have like just a general one because everything in it is, I mean, it's really if you have a cycle, if you have female hormones, I think it's every single part of it is for you. And if you don't, 3 out of 4 parts are for you.
Mhm.
So there's foundation, which is all felt safety and nervous system regulation and trauma informed stuff about like facing the unknown, facing things that you can't control, making decisions where all the choices are bad and don't feel good. So all of that's the foundation. And then the nursery is the hormones reductionist anatomy and stuff. And then the house is the whole Chinese medicine diagnosis. So how you connect the dots between the digestion and the anxiety and the immune function and the period symptoms. There's a whole
Wow.
big survey at the beginning that has you really in depth do your Chinese medicine diagnosis. And then there's 9 videos, one for each section of the diagnoses that goes through like, here's how you work on if you have a lot of um, digestive qi deficiency, or here's what you work on when you're very qi stagnant and clenchy. And so there's videos for that. And then it goes into the neighborhood, which is relational and boundaries and community and, just life work balance and things like that. And so you could just substitute anything you're working on for fertility and it would apply. I also have a tremendous amount. I don't ever want anything to be inaccessible. So I have a tremendous amount of free things. I have a whole bunch of freebies. I have a miscarriage guide that I think is really important that goes through medicated and unmedicated abortion and miscarriages. That is no sign up needed. So anybody in any state that is trying to use medications or doing anything that needs support through pregnancy termination or loss can get that without having to like click or sign or anything. And I have a YouTube channel. I have a shorter 1 week course that's like a snippet of the foundation ideas, just to kind of get like one a day, like 5 minute video with a lesson that you think about throughout the day, and then journaling at the end of the day.
Mm.
I'll give you a code that if anybody wants to do any paid programs, it's 10% off for anybody who listens to your podcast. Um, and yeah, I have a huge blog post. I'm going to put up a couple blog posts that I did to prep for this podcast about hormone testing and adrenal fatigue and stuff like that with much more data. So check out lifehealinglife.com. Go to the tab that says online education, and there's links to everything drop down from there.
Thank you, and I will link all of that down below.
Yeah,
But
I love it.
I love how much support that you offer the community, and thank you so much for all of that, and the 10% off for sure is super beneficial. So last question is, you obviously come on a lot of podcasts and have been sharing your story and holding your practice for 20 years. What is one question that you wish people would ask you coming on podcasts, or what is one
Oh my
topic that you wish
gosh.
that you could speak more about but just doesn't tend to come up?
I mean, I think you've actually done such a nice job. Like I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna feature this when this comes out because I think the follow-up questions, the diving in deep, like the saying, okay, but like, what if you can't just pause your stress? Like, I think that nuance is how what I do really works. I have a dream of doing a podcast where it's kind of like the Esther Perel, where you're listening to people in therapy, listening to me do sessions with people, because it's like, there's all sorts of things that come up. And it's like, really, how does this look in real messy
Mm,
fluxing human lives and bodies. So I don't know that there's any one question, but I feel like you really got to the heart of
mm,
the nuance of it and the like messiness of it. And I just think it's again, I know if there was like one point I could do or one herbal formula that I could give people for their things, it would be so easy, but it's
mm,
so much more enriching and joyful. And there's a book that I just started to read that is called Outshining Trauma, and it's a
mm,
combination of Buddhism and internal family systems, their trauma therapy. And it's just like I feel like what I do in my life really is like outshining my trauma and like it's the growth, it's the like bigness, it's the connection to people in other states and other countries. And you got to think really big and messy to do that kind of stuff. So
mm,
that's a very long answer, but I think
mm.
you ask a lot of very right questions. So thank you, Hannah.
Mm. Oh, thank you. And it's true. Life is so interconnected. That's the more that I learn and all the shit that happens to you, it's truly what you learn from it and then that is going to apply to so many different areas of your life. So even if there are a lot of cycle issues or infertility, which is so hard and I can't imagine, I truly can't, but there's so many lessons that you can pull from that and so much wisdom that you can pull from any situation that's happened to you because
Yeah.
some things do happen to us that are outside of our control, but we have a lot of control
Amen.
that we can choose how we respond to them, and I love
Exactly.
that. Really, that is the heart of your business. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
coming on, Nicole. It was so great to have this conversation. I will link all of the ways to connect with Nicole below. And of course, as always, reach out with any questions to either Nicole or I am happy to connect you with Nicole if you have more things that come up. But thank you so much for coming on. This was truly such a powerful conversation, and I appreciate your time and your wisdom.
My pleasure. Thank you.